GreyGray, tell.
Check it.
They say intuition is a woman's best friend, but let me tell you, mine almost got me killed. My name is Sandra Mitchell, and I'm the woman who almost became the 56th victim of one of the most prolific serial killers in modern history. Today, I want to share my story not just because it still haunts my dreams, but because it might save someone else's life. It all started 18 months ago when I met Jack Harrison at a coffee shop in downtown Portland. I was 32, recently, divorced, and honestly, pretty lonely. I'd been single for 2 years after my marriage fell apart, and I was just starting to think about dating again. Jack was charming from the moment he approached my table. Tall, well-dressed, with this perfect smile and these incredibly kind eyes. He apologized for interrupting my reading but said he couldn't help but notice I was reading his favorite book. We started talking, and hours flew by like minutes. He told me he was a traveling businessman, something vague about consulting for tech companies. He said he'd been married before, but his wife had died in a car accident 3 years earlier. The way he talked about her, with such genuine sadness and love, it made my heart ache for him. Looking back now, I realize how perfectly crafted that story was. How every detail was designed to make me feel sorry for him, to make me want to heal his broken heart. We started dating, and honestly, it felt like a fairy tale. Jack was everything my ex-husband wasn't: attentive, romantic, generous. He'd send flowers to my office just because. He'd remember tiny details about conversations we'd had weeks earlier. He'd planned these elaborate surprise dates that made me feel like I was the most important person in his world. The only thing that seemed a little odd was how private he was about his past. He didn't have many photos, claimed he'd lost most of them in a house fire. He didn't talk much about his family, said they'd had a falling out years ago. His phone was always locked, and he'd step away to take calls, but I pushed those concerns aside because I was falling in love. For the first time in years, I felt genuinely happy. Jack made me laugh, made me feel beautiful, made me believe in romance again. After 6 months of dating, he proposed. It was perfect: a sunset dinner on the beach, a beautiful ring, a speech about how I'd brought light back into his dark world. I said yes without hesitation. We had a small wedding planned for the following month. Jack said he preferred intimate ceremonies, just us and a few close friends. He wanted to have it at this beautiful old mansion he'd rented outside the city. Everything was arranged so quickly, so efficiently. I was impressed by how organized he was. The night before our wedding, Jack suggested we stay at the mansion separately, something about not wanting to break tradition by seeing the bride before the ceremony. I thought it was sweet, old-fashioned. He said he'd stay in the guest cottage while I took the main house. That's when things started to feel wrong. The mansion was gorgeous but eerily quiet. It felt too isolated, too cut off from everything. My phone barely had signal, and the landline didn't seem to work. When I tried to call my sister to confirm the morning arrangements, I couldn't get through. I found myself wandering through the house, and that's when I noticed the photographs. They were scattered throughout the room's wedding photos, all featuring Jack with different women. At first, I thought they might be family photos, maybe cousins or sisters, but something about them felt off. The more I looked, the more unsettled I became. These weren't family photos. These were wedding photos. Different brides, different dresses, different locations, but always the same groom. Always Jack. I counted them. 15 different women in wedding dresses, all married to the man I was supposed to marry the next day. My hands were shaking as I tried to rationalize what I was seeing. Maybe he was a wedding photographer. Maybe these were sample photos from his portfolio. Maybe there was some innocent explanation, but deep down, I knew something was terribly wrong. I decided to search the house more thoroughly. In the library, I found a scrapbook hidden behind some books. Inside were more photos, more brides, more weddings. But these weren't just wedding photos. There were newspaper clippings too, missing person reports, obituaries, articles about women who had disappeared shortly after getting married, women who had died in mysterious accidents, women whose bodies were never found. My blood turned to ice as I read through them. Sarah Williams, married to Jack Harrison, died in a hiking accident 2 weeks after her wedding. Body never recovered. Jennifer Martinez, married to Jack Harrison, drowned during their honeymoon cruise. Body never found. Rebecca Thompson, married to Jack Harrison, died in a car crash on a remote mountain road. Car found, body missing. The pattern was horrifying and unmistakable. Jack had been marrying women and killing them for years, decades even, and I was supposed to be next. I forced myself to keep reading, to count every clipping, every photo, every victim. 55 women, 55 brides who had trusted this man, loved this man, married this man. 55 women who had died because they made the same mistake I almost made. I was going to be number 56. I had to get out of there, but my car keys were missing. I remember Jack offering to move my car to make room for the catering trucks. He must have taken my keys then. The isolation of the mansion suddenly made perfect sense. He'd chosen this place specifically because it would be impossible for me to escape. I tried the phones again. Nothing. I checked every window, every door. The house was like a beautiful prison, and I was trapped inside with a serial killer who would be back in the morning to complete his ritual. That's when I forced myself to think strategically. Panicking wouldn't save me. I needed to be smart, to use whatever advantages I had. I spent the rest of the night preparing. I found kitchen knives and hid them in strategic locations throughout the house. I located all the possible escape routes and made sure I could find them in the dark. I even found some old camping gear in the basement and took a flare gun, but most importantly, I found Jack's real collection in the basement. Behind a false wall, I discovered his trophy room. Driver's licenses, wedding rings, pieces of jewelry, all belonging to his victims. There were photos too, horrible photos that I won't describe, and detailed journals documenting each murder, each method, each location where he disposed of the bodies. He was evidence, proof of what he'd done. If I could survive long enough to get it to the police, justice could finally be served for all those women. I spent hours photographing everything with my phone, even though I had no signal to send the images anywhere. I hid copies of the most damning evidence in multiple locations throughout the house. If something happened to me, maybe someone would eventually find them. As dawn approached, I heard Jack's car in the driveway. I quickly returned everything to its place and positioned myself in the bridal suite, pretending to be getting ready for our wedding. He came upstairs with coffee and breakfast, acting like the perfect, caring groom. He asked how I'd slept, if I was excited about our big day, if I needed anything to make the morning more special. The performance was flawless. If I hadn't found that scrapbook, I would never have suspected that this charming man was planning to murder me in a few hours, but I had my own performance to give. I smiled and played the blushing bride, gushing about how perfect everything was, how lucky I felt to be marrying him. I even managed to cry a few happy tears. The ceremony was set for noon in the mansion's garden. Jack had arranged for a minister and a photographer, both of whom I now realized were probably accomplices who helped him maintain his cover. They arrived right on schedule, and everything proceeded like a normal wedding. I walked down the makeshift aisle in my white dress, bouquet in hand, smiling at the man I knew was planning to kill me. I said my vows, promising to love him until death do us part, knowing he intended to make that a very short commitment. We exchanged rings, kissed, and posed for photos. I played my part perfectly, even as my heart was pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. After the ceremony, Jack suggested we take a walk around the property before the reception. Just the two of us to have a private moment as newlyweds. This was it. This was when he was going to make his move. We walked toward the woods behind the mansion, and I could feel the energy change. Jack's demeanor shifted subtly. He became more focused, more predatory. His hand on my arm grew tighter. When we reached a clearing about a quarter-mile from the house, he stopped walking. He turned to me with that same charming smile, but his eyes had gone cold. He told me he had a confession to make, that he hadn't been entirely honest about his past, that there had been other wives before me, many other wives he was enjoying. This, I realized, the revelation, the fear in my eyes, the power he had over me. This was part of his ritual, part of what he got off on. But I had a confession too. I told him I knew about the scrapbook, about the 55 women, about the trophy room in the basement. I told him I'd found his journals, his photos, his sick collection of souvenirs. For the first time since I'd met him, Jack looked genuinely surprised. Then he started laughing. He said it didn't matter what I knew because I'd never get the chance to tell anyone. He said I was going to join his collection, just like all the others. He said he'd enjoyed our time together, but all good things must come to an end. That's when he pulled out the knife, but I was ready for him. The flare gun was hidden in my bouquet, and I fired it directly at his face. The bright red flare hit him in the chest, and he stumbled backward, momentarily blinded and disoriented. I ran. I ran faster than I'd ever run in my life, crashing through the woods in my wedding dress, branches tearing at the fabric, my heart pounding in my ears. I could hear him behind me, cursing, shouting that I couldn't escape, that he'd find me and make me pay for what I'd done. But I had studied the property the night before. I knew exactly where I was going. I made it back to the mansion and grabbed the evidence I'd hidden, along with one of the kitchen knives. Then I barricaded myself in the library and used the landline I discovered actually worked from that room. I called 911 and told them everything. I gave them the address, told them about the murders, told them about the evidence. I begged them to hurry because Jack was still out there, still dangerous. 20 minutes later, the police arrived. They found Jack trying to set fire to his trophy room, attempting to destroy the evidence. But it was too late. I'd already photographed everything, and there was too much for him to destroy quickly. They arrested him on the spot. The search of the property revealed everything: the journals, the trophies, the photographs. Using his detailed records, they were able to locate burial sites across multiple states and recover the remains of 37 of his victims. The trial was a media circus. Jack's killing spree had lasted over 20 years. He'd perfected his method, moving from state to state, changing his identity, but always using the same basic approach. He'd meet lonely women, sweep them off their feet, propose quickly, and then murder them during or shortly after the wedding. The prosecution called me his intended 56th victim, but I prefer to think of myself as the one who got away, the one who broke his pattern and brought him to justice. Jack was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He'll never hurt another woman, never destroy another family, never add another trophy to his sick collection. But the real victory isn't just that he was stopped. It's that 55 families finally got answers. 55 women who had been missing for years finally got justice. Their remains were returned to their families for proper burial. Their cases were closed. I still have nightmares sometimes. I still check my locks twice before bed. I still get nervous when I meet new people, wondering what secrets they might be hiding. But I also know that I survived something that 55 other women didn't. I know that my intuition, my quick thinking, and maybe just a little bit of luck saved my life and brought a monster to justice. The most important thing I learned from this experience is to trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. If someone seems too good to be true, they probably are. And if you find yourself in danger, don't panic, think, plan, and fight back. I'm sharing my story because I want other women to know that they can survive, that they can fight back, that they can win. Jack thought he was smarter than everyone else, thought he could keep killing forever. But in the end, he was just another criminal who got caught because he underestimated his victim. I wasn't just bride number 56. I was the bride who brought him down, and sometimes that's exactly what justice looks like.